Hey folks, Steve here with another Nations in Arms video. This is now the sort of redux of the Grand Campaign after the 1805 tremendous success of the French that led to the fall of London and basically French victories all around. Mostly, for the land war, that's just what happens, but for the naval stuff, massive amount of bad luck for the British compounded to a tremendous effect. Um, and that felt weird, and it felt like that should not really have happened, and ordinarily it wouldn't. But I played through, and we did reach a victory condition. But I didn't want that to be the like, okay, hey, that's the 1805 campaign, guys. Thanks for watching. See you later. We're all done here. No, no, no. There's a lot more gaming to do here. So what I am readjusting is to skip ahead to the 1809 campaign. So this is still considered like a grand campaign. It's just moving the start date a little bit further back. There's an additional option for the grand campaign to start in 1813, which is less of a grand campaign, I guess, and more like, the late stages of things that you can still play with all the, big campaign rules just much later, right? So this is kind of nice, a nice spot in the middle where France has experienced a lot of success, but it still has a lot of things ahead of it and battles that need to be waged. And in particular, this scenario has a lot of challenges for the French player, which we'll get into here very shortly. So the intention is to, like before, play this 1809 campaign to some conclusion, either because one side wins, automatic victory, or something like that, or we get to the end of 1814. If we get to the end of 1814, depending on how the campaign goes, we might then go to the Waterloo scenario to finish things off. If it really feels like from 1809 to 1814 we get a really good uh, broad set of things happening that we would expect to see happening, and we really get to experience all the fun, maybe invading Russia and all that. If for some reason the campaign goes a bit pear shaped, I will again adjust and we'll do some additional scenarios to kind of fill in the gaps. So, if for some reason we never get into Russia as France or something like that, that might warrant me playing the 1812 scenario just as an added thing, just so we get to see some of that. If 1809 campaign, if this campaign ends in like 1810 or 1811 because of an automatic victory or it became really one-sided, then I think we would still do that 1812 Russia campaign and probably follow it up with an 1813 campaign. So what all scenarios we play from here is really just going to be the outcome of how these campaign scenarios go. I will continue to adjust so that by the end of this whole series of videos, we will have at least seen a lot of almost everything this game has to offer. I will say that from 1805 to 1809, it does mean we miss out on a couple of things. So we won't see the Rossbach Avenged scenario, which is really a smaller scenario that is set up to allow you to play France versus Prussia. Basically, we skip that. I don't think we necessarily need to play that scenario, though I'm sure it would be fun. There is also a dedicated 1808 to 1814 uh, Spanish ulcer scenario, wherein you're basically just playing in Spain the whole time, which means there are more turns than some of the other quote unquote smaller scenarios, but they go much faster because you're not playing across the whole map, you're just playing in Spain. And given that in this 1809 campaign, we're going to be dealing with the Spanish Liberation War, I don't feel compelled to play that as a separate thing. Um, but maybe in the future I'll return and play that out as a small little taste. So I think this is a good place for us to keep going. 1809, a few years have passed, a little bit of a gap in our timeline, but this is the historical situation. I do want to hit kind of what is going on right now. Where does the story pick up? Well, Britain is still at war with France. Austria is now re-entering the coalition after being at peace for some time, after being knocked out in 1805. And so a lot of the highlight of this scenario will be France having to contest against Austria that has come back and wants sort of its own revenge. Um, And there's also a Tyrolean rebellion here, which is a factor. Um, and so we're going to deal with that. The French will need to fight the Austrians off for certain. This is the campaign era in which we see the Battle of Wagram, which is pretty famous battle, but also Aspern, where Napoleon's defeated actually, and I suspect that the card that the coalition player starts with, which is Art of War, where an army leader gets an extra bonus, is to allow the greater likelihood of that type of victory for the Austrians in somehow surmounting all the French bonuses. But after that battle, Napoleon would follow it up with the Wagram battle, and eventually, historically speaking, Austria would be defeated once again, forced to peace, and then brought into the alliance, into their alliance eventually. So we'll see if Austria can do any better this time. So that's kind of one primary concern area. For Russia and Prussia, both are still in a mandatory peace. So Russia is in a mandatory peace until winter of 1809. So this year, at least, we don't need to worry about Russia. And then Prussia is in a mandatory peace until the spring of 1810. I have some pieces of paper up there to remind me on both countries. So they're kind of out of it for a while, and then even when they exit the peace, then some things will happen. So for Prussia, Prussia will actually enter into a mandatory alliance. So Prussia will be allied with France. That will help them a great deal in terms of coverage of the continent. Russia, I think, will just be neutral after the mandatory peace. So that opens the door for Britain to try to influence it and bring it in, or France invades Russia. We'll see how that goes. I'm not quite sure what to expect there, because as with any of these campaign scenarios, once we start playing, things can become more ahistorical. We may get some lucky diplomacy die rolls either way. Things can shift a lot over time. So we'll worry about that in time. And that mandatory piece is coming from basically the Treaty of Tilsit still. In the other major area of concern during this campaign is going to be Spain. So this kind of a strange set of work here where things are kind of all over the place. The things with the blue control markers that don't come with the game, a reminder if you haven't watched earlier videos, I have these wooden discs that I bought from a game component online store that I just use for whatever. I like them as control markers. They stand out a bit more. So the French control various forts in some of the provinces of Spain. This is the aftermath of overthrowing the Spanish king and having Joseph Bonaparte put in as king of Spain. So they do control militarily many of the provinces of Spain, and in fact, there are still a number of French forces that are kind of out and about through here. Actually, I think I meant to put this guy right there. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so they have some units here, but Spain is part of the coalition and is fighting its liberation war, which is a whole set of special rules we'll maybe talk about a little bit later. But the main thing is, while they don't have a huge amount of production points, they're basically able to just generate, some units. They're going to get some help from Britain, and they also have these guerrilla units. And guerrilla units have a limited movement of 4. They've got a couple of other things here. These are not meant to be tough fighters in terms of conventional combat, but what they do is they put road speed bumps in front of the French armies and cut off supply. And so this is part of the guerrilla warfare. They are the guerrilla units. So not only do the French have to worry about what Spanish forces may be on the board, as well as the Portuguese and the British, but these guerrillas are going to be in their backfield, so that it will make for an interesting challenge. And the French player will have to balance both their attention in Spain as well as the major conflict in Austria. And the key thing here being we have good old Wellington here, commanding an army that is in Lisbon and will be heading into Spain proper to fight that peninsular war. So, an exciting set of events there that we'll see play out. I'm not sure what will happen, but will certainly be interesting. So, as opposed to the last scenario where the Spanish were allied with the French, they are enemy, and the guerrillas and the whole liberation war takes effect. To remind, if France wants to beat Spain in the liberation war, they're going to need to take control of some of the remaining ports in Spain, and control Madrid. So it might seem like they're in a good position to do that, but I think it's going to be difficult. We'll say that. I think it's going to be difficult, as it was. So there's all of that, and then finally there's three stacks over here that have red bingo chits on them. That is to signify there are three stacks. One of them is Napoleon and the Grand Army that set up there, but by option, some, all, or none of them, we can alternatively set up adjacent to Bayonne to support Spain. So this is basically a choice. This is the like, here's what Napoleon did. You don't have to do that. You can do something else, because Napoleon was in Spain up to about this time period, and when Austria, went to war with France, Napoleon sensed great danger, and he, marched off quickly back to Germany to fight the Austrians, and he left the rest of Spain in the care of the other marshals. But you can choose not to do that. So we could pick uh, Messina or Udino to instead go down to Spain. We could send Napoleon to Spain. We could send all three and hope that the existing French forces here, in Germany, um, can fight the Austrians, and we focus on the Spanish, and we really strive to win the liberation war and kick the British out of Portugal. I need to make a decision there, and I'm not quite ready to do it in this segment of the video. I need to think about it. The thing about it is that we have a French army over here that will contest the Austrian Italian army. So yeah, there's some coverage there. Over here, there's plenty of things to be concerned about. We have Poland as our minor ally. We've got some units over here, so we need to hold against an Austrian incursion, and then we need to sweep through this way. There are some Austrian forces out here, including Charles with the Army of the Rhine, which is a pretty scary looking army, all things considered. And to contest him, we have Davout, we've got the French Army of Germany, which isn't quite as big, I don't think, as the Army of the Rhine. Some reinforcements from the Confederation of the Rhine and Westphalia that we would need to move south to join up. So there's definitely a question of like, what do we want to do and how fast do we want to do it? Can we, maybe as the French, keep these guys over here, quickly try to stomp the Austrians back into submission, just try to hold on to what we can hold on to in Spain, and then eventually send some reinforcements back to Spain. But that's kind of a far distance in this game's movement terms to go from Austria to Spain. It is tough. Like you got to be running and gunning to get all the way over there, and it's going to take you some seasons to do it. So if we can shut down Austria in 1809, great. If we can do that, then that gives us 1810 to try to run over down into Spain, or we might be then thinking about getting in a position to enter into Russia. So a lot of unknowns. I need to think through what I want to do here. The fact that the French are spread out up here, it kind of makes me think, oh, it might take them too long to get together to fight Charles, and Charles is a good leader on the Austrian side. That could be a problem. So there's a lot of different things there to consider. And we also, as the French, have a lot of Corsairs in the Corsairs box, so there is going to be a need for the British to send some ships over there to deal with them. So while, as opposed to our last scenario, where the British were besieged on the island, they are here historically accurate with a strong navy that is blockading and in control of many of the sea zones of importance here. they will have to draw off some of their strength to deal with the Corsairs. Probably there's some good Corsairs in that box. So yeah, this is an interesting scenario. It certainly pits the French in a position to have to pick how they want to operate. It's a two front war, and one which is very difficult due to guerrillas. The other, a conventional, strong, resurgent Austria seeking revenge. Can we avoid an Aspern and follow up with a Wagram? Maybe Wagram. Can we suppress the Spanish as the French? They're certainly feasible. From the coalition perspective, um, like a lot of these campaigns, the coalition just needs to keep alive, keep it going, keep contesting. If the Spanish can win their liberation war, we can eliminate a lot of French units and be pressing into southern France if we're really lucky. I'm not sure we will be that lucky, but that's feasible. And then otherwise, we're waiting out the clock. So it's just really, can the Austrians beat the French? If the Austrians can survive, I think the first goal for the Austrians is survival. If they can start to push back into Italy, if they can push back into Germany and start to take away French gains, that would be very valuable. And eventually, we would hope to get Russia back into the game. And it's going to be important they try to do that because when the Prussians join the French, the Prussians could be keeping any remnant forces of the Austrians busy, allowing the French some breathing room, and the coalition can't afford to do that. So when we're in the thick of things like this, the thick of the Napoleonic Wars, there may not be an easy choice just to say, hey, we're gonna win the whole war against Napoleon this couple years, but we can keep alive long enough to see the late stages of the game, and that's going to be good. One other thing that needs mentioning before I wrap up the intro here is uh, France, according to the scenario rules, has already called out conscripts once. So that doesn't impact anything directly. What it did mean is when they did that, they got expanded whenever it is assumed they did that in like 1808 or something. Um, they got a expanded capacity to build units, and they got more money to build units. You can do that once for free. If for some reason we feel like, as France, we need to do it again, there are tremendous costs to doing it. It also means that French units no longer get the +2 anymore. They go down to a +1. So if a printed unit has a plus, let's see if I have an example somewhere quickly. I don't. A lot of French units have a +2 as their assault modifier. Those all become +1 instead of +2, even if the counter says +2. Sort of a reversal of the Revolutionary War stuff that we dealt with a long while back in the War of the First Coalition. So if France has to do it, and this reflects the like Napoleon became reliant on conscripts, less experienced troops to fill in after all the casualties, there will be negative consequences. So I'm hoping France can avoid that. If they can win enough decisive victories against their opponent and avoid taking too many losses, we may be able to get by with just normal production. But if we're really caught in a bad situation and we need to call up conscripts, that is a difficult decision, and we'll talk about it when the time comes if we need to make that decision. Anyway, that's a good intro. Let me do a quick cut, and I'll start looking at the next part of just getting started here. Okay, for you that was a quick transition of a second. For me, it's been several days that I had to take away before I could come back to the game. I've been busy putting together some new minor shelving units for the game room here so that I have expanded storage for the many games that I own. Um, and then otherwise, just a lot of busy other things going on. So I'm back to continue this now. Again, for you, this is all one video, so I didn't go anywhere. I've been with you the whole time. So we're going to get started here. It is the spring of 1809. The one significant difference between this scenario and many of the other scenarios that we've played is that the coalition is actually the faction that has the initiative. So there's basically a lot more capability for on this very first go to pick a chit that would enable the coalition to get in as good of a position as they can, um, which would maybe mean attacking or moving on all fronts to the best of their ability before the French have had a chance to rearrange themselves, um, and basically get anywhere in terms of good positioning. I mean, the French have pretty decent positions, period, but it's important for the coalition to try to make things inconvenient for the French. In Spain, that may take the form of Wellington heading north and fighting Soult, which is what he did historically, and then taking the time to maneuver the guerrillas to cut off the supply lines. In some cases, they're kind of well positioned to cut off supply lines, and others, they're really not. So there might have to be some maneuvering, and I apologize if there's some glare from the lights that I have. The lights in this room are kind of on sconces, but I think no matter what way the lamps were set up, they would still reflect onto the plexiglass. So I'm sorry, just deal with that as best you can. I'll try to keep it in the water where it's not obscuring the vision of units. So that's an obvious thing to try to do, make Spain tough. And then for Austria, it does give us the opportunity to push maybe against the Polish over there in the east, over that way. And then it gives us the chance to try to move into the respective parts of southern Germany and Italy before the French can kind of bring units together to form a stronger set of armies. So, like, there is a gap of water here. It's going to be kind of hard to see at this angle between the French army of Italy and this stack that are in Trieste. So the Italians, or not the Italians, the Austrians probably want to exploit that, and then same way over here, I think Charles would want to do his level best to catch and destroy any French stacks not with Napoleon, so that when Napoleon and Charles face off, they're in a better position holistically, or at least the Austrians are better off. They have a pretty large army, to be honest, so they can kind of handle a few good, punches on the French, try to knock them down, see what happens. So I think for the very first shit, because the guerrillas require a one chit, they have an intrinsic leader with a leader value of one, basically. They can only move on that one chit, kind of like how independent units by themselves can move a little bit on the one chit. So while I'm not sure that it's the best move, because usually, in my opinion, I think you want the 4 chit to come out first, generally speaking. I do think the coalition probably wants to go with the 1 chit, get everything going, get all gears churning, and then let the rest of the random chits come out and see what happens. So, again, we want to move everything, including the guerrillas, to make the French's life more difficult. I'll kind of show the aftermath of all of that, but we'll go ahead and again to show coalition land 1. That's going to be our chit. The rest will go into the cup. And both sides will probably save their second naval chit for summer, just because in summer you're going to play every single chit. So that's kind of, it's less of a waste because you can only include the naval 2 chit, I think, 1 season per year. It's a waste potentially to put it in spring or fall or winter because the turn could end before those extra chits come in and then you never really get to use it. So unless there's a dire situation going on, I've been having both sides tend to put their second naval chit for the year in during summer. So just an FYI on that. So, all right, coalition land 1. I'm gonna run it through. We'll show the aftermath and we'll keep rolling here. We'll try to get through maybe the first season or 2 of 1809 in this video, and then probably do the rest of 1809 in another, and we'll just keep playing through in faster chunks after that. Okay, I think we're about done with the first activation. I'm trying to see if there's any other activations I want to make. We'll call this a very mixed opening turn. So, well, maybe let's start in the west. Let's just start in the west. So, in Spain, Spanish army came and took the fortress here. and it's just in a general good position, pushing back onto the French. The A combination of guerrilla movement and other things have basically put Madrid out of supply for the French. So just something to keep in mind. We have, I believe, cut off the supply lines. It takes too many movement points to get from Madrid to any of the other supply links for the French, and they have to trace supply through here, generally speaking, because this guy is sitting on the path on the east end there. So that is a problem. That is a problem for these guys, and basically a problem for these guys. Over here, we moved guerrillas and a force led by La Romana through here, dropped a detachment off, and he disrupted and destroyed a French depot, which creates a cutoff of supply over here, which had put Soult out of supply, and Wellington just walked up and crushed them for no losses, eliminated, and is in a good position to kind of swing up around the coast, take out La Coruña, this depot, and then probably Leon, and then everything else is in rough shape. It's going to be up to poor Massena here, who is one of the French forces I decided to send back over to Spain to try to reverse course. I think he's going to have a hell of a time doing it. So already Spain looks like it's going to be, basically Spain is going to win its liberation war. I think already not looking good, but we'll see. I mean, we don't know everything that's going to happen here. The French can chase these guerrillas away, so it's already an interesting situation. Um, Elsewhere, we'll talk about the good things before we talk about the atrocious things. Um, the Austrians moved in here and took back Trieste. The French retreated away. So no real combat, but the fortress was taken with no losses. Other Austrian units are kind of moving around to the passes just to make sure that Austrian army can't be easily outflanked. And then in Poland, basically, we had the army of Bohemia move up, fought the army of Poland, which were a couple corps that managed to march to the sounds of guns to the other's aid. Um, but both were defeated, and then that Austrian force is about to start besieging Warsaw. They didn't have enough movement points to actually start doing it, but they're basically in a good position to just go ahead and do that without too much concern. Prussia's not in the battle yet, right? So they have a little bit of time to try to clear up Poland itself and then be prepared to be facing the Prussians when the Prussians join France in the spring of 1810. So just the beginning of the next year, we'll have to worry about this front, which in my mind makes a good reason for the Austrians to try to seize Poland quickly and then hold it with other forces. And then we also had the forces near Prague head west. We managed to catch some French forces that were in Dresden. The French forces decided to stick it out, thinking they may be able to win, the siege assaults. That was not true. So the Austrians have taken Dresden. They did not replace the fortress, which is now maybe turning out to be a bad move. But they were thinking, well, let's not waste any manpower restoring it. We can just sit on it and at least control the mountain passes into Bohemia. And all of that was going to be, a big show for Charles. So we had another minor Austrian stack come here to start besieging Ratisbon or Regensburg, aka Regensburg, and failed, and so continues the siege. So that's a siege +1. And then we have our good buddy here, Charles, in the army of the Rhine, and boy, that didn't go as well as I thought it was going to. So, with this minor force masking this fortress, they left Salzburg. They did a looping maneuver, and the idea was to crush Davout's corps units here, and then swing down and take Munich, and then be in a pretty good position to go 1v1 with Napoleon or something and then we would have the Art of War card that we would use to try to defeat Napoleon. So that all started to go well until the battle actually went underway, and I kid you not, Davout, the Iron Marshal, earned his nickname in this campaign again, even in this battle. So it was 16 Austrian steps versus 6 French steps. There was a failure to evade on Davout's part, but they did get marched to the sounds of guns. And so Davout ended up having 6 French steps together. One of those was actually a Württemberg corps. Um, and due to the number of steps involved on both sides, it was a major battle. The cards came out decently for the French, and when the dice were rolled, the French actually won. Like, they won in terms of the combat results. Both sides took 4-step losses, so the Austrians went from 16 to 12. The French went from 6 to 2, just 2. And then, the Austrians had lost a major battle. Fortunately, they passed their morale check, so they've now retreated, but that stopped their movement. The key thing was they were going to come around, win, and then move down here and fight another battle maybe, and basically, having fought these guys while they're out of supply, and eliminate them. But now the Iron Marshal, even with French casualties, stopped the maneuver of the main Austrian army here, which puts them at risk and kind of opens up the door for a couple of things to happen. One, we could activate Davout and swing him around and knock out this force at Regensburg. I find Regensburg much easier to pronounce than Ratisbonne. And then really putting Charles's army out of supply, which will then lead Napoleon to go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and potentially totally wreck Charles's army for being out of supply. So it's kind of up in the air a little bit on just, what can the Austrians get out of this situation? I think so, but boy, that's not a great start for Charles's army. But granted, the coalition has done pretty well elsewhere, so maybe that's just the mixed bag that we should expect to get. They didn't use the Art of War card because they were thinking that they would be able to defeat Davout's force without too much trouble, and we wanted to save that card for the inevitable clash with Napoleon. So we still got that Art of War card. It gives us extra bonus for combat, but we're going to have to wait to use it, basically. So that's tricky. And I guess this is one of those things where, in the combat system that's modeled here, like, we were sending a lot of guys in a combat, and they just the frontage of the battle maybe was such that Davout's forces held out well, really hurt the Austrians. The Austrians couldn't find a way to create an outflank situation, and just more men in the field, it leads to bloodier results, is basically the way this all is ending up going. Now, some of the key cards that came in were I'm trying to remember what it was. Basically, the French, we got to use the tactics cards. So we had Year 2 soldiers and Morning Fog, which helped to nullify the Austrian artillery advantage, and the Austrians had Slope, which gave them a little bit of help. But it just wasn't enough. So really put the stink on the Austrian desire to make a crushing victory in southern Germany, which, gosh, just puts the initiative back into the French hands. So we're going to pull the next chit from the cup, and in terms of land impulses, it will have to be a French impulse. I think they would rather it be... They could actually make do with a 4 chit. Any chit will do to punish the Austrians. So we'll pull, and we did get the French land 4 chit. So, maybe one of the better ones. The important thing here is it means that Davout can activate. The army of Germany cannot, but we could have Davout come take control of the army of Germany, I think, and come over here, or have Napoleon go pick up the army,
we have some options here as the French, and I may wait to save the Napoleon Southern Germany front move for last, for my purposes. For you guys, we'll show the aftermath. But again, I feel like the French are in a pretty good position to counterattack there, maybe crush the Austrian army. And if they can do that well, the Austrians are going to be on the back pedal again, trying to defend Vienna this year, and that is not a situation that they want to have happen. So we'll play it through. Okay, to show the aftermath here quickly, we had uh, Suchet come back, pick up a unit, push the guerrillas away, and then likewise, Massena actually managed to kill one of the guerrillas because they rolled snake eyes on an evasion. So trying to restore supply, that succeeded, getting into a position where we can contest. Um, the coalition there, kind of a mixed bag. Otherwise, with the Fort Chit, we activated Davout, who took control of the army of Germany, swept up through here, and then sat, uh, basically adjacent to Charles's army. Napoleon did come around, and rather than try to like march to the sound of guns, I was, because I think if the army of Germany joined Napoleon, and it was the two armies versus one, they would lose their zone of influence, which what I would have rather have wanted to have happen was the Austrians retreat through the ZOI, which they did. Um, and it all worked out, but it was kind of dangerous because Napoleon basically was attacking an army 2.5 times his size, but he had better modifiers because they were out of supply. Long story short, Napoleon did win. The uh, Austrians took a few step losses and then had to retreat through the zone of influence of the Army of Germany, taking two more step losses, which the combined step losses caused the Austrian Army of the Rhine to demoralize. And they are technically still in supply now because they can trace to Salzburg at Munich itself because they retreated basically to Munich. Um, but they're in rough shape, and basically or either Napoleon or the army of Germany with Davout can kind of get in there and disrupt, and probably create another situation where they can't maneuver very well. Um, so we could see Charles rally his troops and then make a second strike at one of the French armies, but we'll see. Basically, the French are going to come out ahead on this one, I think, but we don't know what's going to happen in Italy yet. So it's still kind of an open season game here, still to come. So we're going to pull the next chit. I should say I did actually pull the Empire naval chit. The French fleet at Brest tried to make a breakout and failed. They didn't lose anything though, so kind of par for course. So we'll pull the next chit, and it is Coalition Land 2. So that means that basically every coalition stack on the board can activate except for independent units and guerrillas. So a lot of decisions to make here. I'll play it through and show the aftermath. I think the coalition, will make gains in Spain, but are going to have to scramble to make something happen here in the German theater. Okay, I'm free camming it for this one, guys. Freestanding handheld camera, rather than have it on the uh, the stand. Just want to show that Wellington has gone ahead and progressed, and is now, I guess, he eventually didn't needed to have left behind that. Well, he needed the detachment there to get through La Coruña, but now he's in good shape for supply. Um, Minor movements all around, just consolidating. The French still have potent forces, and really they can continue to trace supply all the way through here. So this is kind of the critical supply line for the French in Spain. Couldn't quite do much more, and even taking what Wellington did has kind of drained his force, unfortunately. In southern Germany, Charles's army rallied and then tried to make a maneuver to put, and you can see we left an infantry behind in Munich as part of the a way to cut supply against the French, both armies that are stuck over here in southeast Bavaria, or were in southeast Bavaria. Charles made a flank maneuver against Napoleon. Napoleon intercepted to maintain supply and managed to win against the Austrians. The Austrians did not demoralize, but they are heavily weakened, though the Grand Army itself has only a single step of old guard units there, which puts Napoleon in a very dangerous position. Fortunately, I think he can simply grab Davout's army, the army of Germany, and basically have enough to finish off the Austrians and probably then some. Because of that, the other Austrian armies, the forces that were in Dresden, are pulling back. And they pulled back to here. The army in Poland left Warsaw, did not siege it, and instead started moving south to stop basically the French from overrunning the country. We did try to make an attack down here with the Austrian army of Italy. The French Italian army under Eugene uh, intercepted and managed to defeat the Austrians, though it was a really close run thing. But the Austrians did demoralize, which kind of shuts down their offensive for the moment. So the French have an opportunity to kind of counterattack or to do something. There is an Austrian force detachment kind of holding the opposite end of the mountain pass there. But I think any ideas that the Austrians were going to kind of counterattack and break the French armies has kind of gone away. Though I think both sides will kind of fight themselves to exhaustion. And there's still some other forces, scattered forces around the map that haven't had a really good chance to activate yet, but I already pulled the next chit, and it is the Empire Land 1 chit, which will actually mean, like, if we really wanted to, we actually could see some of these German units kind of come over and join up with Napoleon and replenish the Grand Army, and then have Davout's army of Germany be the one doing the ass kicking, eliminate an army, and then be formed up to continue to press onto Austria, or see the Austrian Italian army collapse, and then we'll be fighting in the main country, main areas of Austria itself, likely seeing the collapse of the Austrian army and a peace treaty and probably a mandatory alliance. So I mean, we don't know what the way the dice are going to go, but I think on the odds now, both sides will have enough time to get pulled together, and it will probably go to the French victory. It is really tough to say what's going to happen down here in Spain. The French are in trouble, but they may be able to pull together something of a defense, even if it means they're fighting, back here. Eventually, they can at least hold a strong position, but it's going to be close, I think. The French have an opportunity to push back out, um, but it'll be really tough to say how much progress they'll be able to make. Certainly, wanting to clear this this supply line is going to be important, I think, regardless. But there's some potent coalition armies, and or not armies necessarily. I guess Wellington is potent. Wellington and some of these Spanish forces, do pose a major threat. So kind of a tight situation, even with some major, you know, not good die rolls for the Austrians, or basically a bad general situation for the Austrians. Um, I will take an opportunity to show the leader deaths so far. So Lannes actually did die in that big first fight between the French and the Austrians by the Grand Armée. And we did just lose in the Army of Italy an Italian commander. The British have lost Beresford so far. And that was down in Spain due to some unfortunate leader die rolls. So, and oddly enough, the Austrians have managed not to lose any of their leaders to death anyway. There are a few that have been lost to being wounded, but that's kind of a different thing. Obviously, death is different than life. All right, so I will play through the French Land 1 chit, or the Empire Land 1 chit, and we'll see how much the Austrians are going to be punished here. Okay, here's the aftermath of the French land one chit. So we have the force under Suchet beginning the siege. The fortress here has kind of cleaned out uh, some of the, or yeah, beginning a siege with that Spanish force in the fortress. So could kind of see that kind of go back and forth, or get stalled, perhaps. We did actually trap the guerrillas up here and got rid of them. So the French force that was in Barcelona is now here at Girona and will uh, move back south eventually. These guys are holding Saragossa just because we don't want to um, let these guys activate and disrupt the French supply. And then over here, Massena did clear some of the space, the army of the Spanish, not army, but corps that was here. The Spanish force eliminated. It's kind of out of gas, but has secured the sort of northern flank. And then we had Jerome get a little ballsy here because Wellington's activations are over, and he came through and is pushing the uh, the guerrillas back. So the whole idea here being, we want to try to eliminate the guerrillas if we can catch them. And some of the time that's occurred because on 2d6 you still can roll low enough that a +5 for being a guerrilla won't save you during the avoiding combat. So they have gotten caught a little bit a couple of times. If you keep moving, it's just that you spend all your movement points chasing the guerrillas. Um, but the French are kind of salvaging the situation. The thing they're going to have to watch out for as we go through the rest of this year is, can they take some of these fortresses back? Can they kick Wellington back? These French forces can certainly get some reinforcements from France in the next year, but it's still tricky. They're still going to have to watch out. Attrition could continue to be a major issue here as they go. They can be spread very thin. And if we want to win the Liberation War, we've got to take Valencia, Cartagena, Cadiz, Lisbon, uh, Porto, La Coruña, which, you kind of need to take these fortresses in the middle of the country just to maintain supply. And you just know that the guerrillas are going to pop up again. So it definitely takes some concerted effort to get to all of these different ports. So the War of Liberation will remain contentious, we'll say. Um, in the Austrian theater, we had the Neapolitan army move up to near Tyrol to put down that rebellion and kind of help seal off the area, whereas the um, French army of Italy sent a Italian corps up through the mountains, defeated a detachment, is besieging Graz here. Siege 0, though they ran out of movement. But then the French army of Italy itself took Trieste back and is now pushing the demoralized Austrian army of Italy back, basically, and kind of putting them in a really not good situation because they could be outflanked and they still have an activation left. These guys are activation over and they're demoralized, so they're kind of deep trouble. And in fact, when you look at the area of Austria over here, there's very little standing in the way between the southern French forces in Vienna and Budapest. Over here, the there is this Austrian force still here holding the way. That Bohemian army is coming down, but a lot of the sort of Confederation of the Rhine Westphalian French forces have moved to join Napoleon. So Napoleon didn't activate this turn, so that all those forces could spend their first activation joining up with him. So now that whole stack is still on their first activation having been spent, which means on a future French chit, Napoleon will be able to move. Um, Davout's army made a swing through here and managed to catch the Austrian army stuck between Zox, area of contact area, and the Ulm fortress, which they did not take.
to where they could not avoid combat at all, and the remnants of the Austrian army of the Rhine was completely eliminated, to just, I think, like one step loss to the German army. But they're kind of out of gas, so there's this potential for this force to try to take care of the Tyrolean guys, and then Napoleon can kind of leap over this way, probably disrupt that force, and then be in a good position in the summer, because we're still in spring, by the way, for the summer campaign that will see the fall of Austria. There's almost no way for Austria to avoid that, and really, there's nowhere else that the British can really make much of an attempt to do anything. So there's really just these two theaters. Spain contested. Austria is almost certainly going to be shut down in summer. And I don't think there's any point in them trying to extend the war. So like continue on, because 2 seasons after summer, assuming they're in the surrender condition in summer, would be winter, which means they would get no production before that second check. Uh, so if they can't do it, if they can't stop it at all before the end of summer, then they're in trouble. If they could hold off in summer somehow, which I don't think is going to happen, then they would maybe think about continuing on, because then they would get a production phase before the second check for the conquered condition. So there's some of the logic that's baked into that when you decide whether or not you're going to let the peace happen if you're conquered versus fighting on. There is a bit of logic about when in the year do you give up. And the earlier it happens, the less likely you're going to continue the war, because again, with no production, if you couldn't stop the enemy from taking your capital and all these other places, you're not going to be able to do it later without a production phase to build new units. So we're going to see Austria fall, almost guaranteed. This would make it the second time Austria is being conquered, which means we'll probably be putting it into a mandatory alliance ultimately. So pretty good for the French. I think they're feeling good. We'll go to the next chit and see what we get. And we get winter quarters. This is going to be the first time it's been drawn, so I'll just make a note of that. And then we'll draw again. And we get Coalition Land 4. So that's going to be hard to get. There we go. Coalition Land 4. Not that they have very many options to use that with. Wellington is all used up. And this guy can't activate. This is not a good. This is why I say you want the 4 chit to come out early or first, because it leaves you with a dead turn where nobody can really activate. We could activate, I guess, this Tyrolean force, but I'm not sure. Well, maybe they would attack. Maybe they would seek to attack the Neapolitan force here, commanded by Murat. They could try to do that. It might be worthwhile to try, but otherwise, there's not much sense in trying to do anything else. So maybe they will. That Tyrolean army will actually try to attack the French to slow down the possibility of them being knocked out, the rebellion being knocked out, and then we'll keep drawing more chits. Alrighty, here we are. The coalition. I guess I need to start chronologically proper. The Tyrolean rebels attacked, lost a step to the French. I pulled the next chit. It was Empire Land 3. French force moved up, won a victory. They retreated. They managed to besiege and take Innsbruck. In Spain, with the rest of the third chit, we did actually activate the Spanish army, or the French army named for Spain, commanded by Jerome Bonaparte. And he actually, after pushing the guerrillas back, swung upward to take out the detachment here to deprive Wellington of a step. Wellington intercepted, and I was like, uh-oh. But Jerome actually managed to defeat Wellington in a very near-run die roll, and he's out of gas. But now Wellington is down to 1 step in his peninsular army stack,
while Jerome is likewise whittled down, but he actually has 3 steps, and Massena is just behind him and can support. And then otherwise, I moved a couple of the French stacks here so that this Spanish force really can't sneak out behind. So we've actually managed to get into a position where we're maintaining our supply line. You can kind of see, the French area of control is this sort of, rectangle in Spain right here. It's not everything, and we've got a force down here. What's really going to matter, I think, is how much progress can they make before the end of the year when more guerrillas are bound to show up. I think is when more guerrillas are going to show up. In the Austrian theater, we had taken Graz and moved the force up to besiege Vienna. There was a field battle between a single step and a single step, so you could consider it a skirmish. The force retreated into the Vienna fortress, and so these guys are just kind of hanging out for the moment out of gas with Vienna besieged. The French Italian army, or however you want to refer to it, French Army of Italy, took Karlstadt and is now pushing the demoralized Austrian army continually back and away, to just kind of put them in a bad position. Maybe we eliminate them. And then finally, Napoleon did move through here, and he fought this Austrian stack and managed to roll snake eyes. But this is the fun. A outnumbered Austrian army still loses to a Napoleon who rolls snake eyes. So Napoleon rolled snake eyes, but the Austrians rolled just bad enough that he did beat them. They each took a step loss, and they retreated and demoralized, took another step loss. They're down to a single step. Napoleon's Grand Armée, which has some Westphalians and Confederation of the Rhine forces with some French, are in a position here to basically move into Prague or face off against the Bohemian army up here, but Davout will be shortly behind him. So, yeah, Austria's goose is cooked. Now it's a question of, can the Austrians do any damage to the French to bleed off some steps so they have to spend money and resources rebuilding them for the long haul. That's kind of the best that the coalition player can hope for. So with that, I should also point out that I pulled the winter quarters chit a second time. So the next time we pull the winter quarters chit, spring is over. We still have a couple of chits left in the cup. So we'll go ahead and pull that. And we get Coalition Land 3. So there are some options, mostly just in Spain, that would matter here. And just kind of poking around. Let's see, these guys are done. I think, yeah, those guys are done. Done. We could move the Tyrolean army, and then we can move a Spanish force, though I don't think there's much that they can do at this point. So I'll see if there's anything else, and then we'll come back and keep rolling through. Okay, just wanting to show the end of the spring turn here, and we'll wrap this video up. A couple more chits came out. The French got to go. There wasn't much to do. The British did get a naval chit where they had sent off a few fleets to go to escort to contest the French corsairs, and basically this is where things stand. So Wellington is in northwestern Spain, kind of in trouble. The other French forces are in okay shape. This guy was actually pretty sneaky, so on the last coalition land chit, he moved up here, attacked the French. He failed to intercept, fought a battle, eliminated the one-step French unit that was here, and then went back home for no losses. So that was kind of just an attrit type of attack, given we don't have many guerrilla units on the board. He had to become a guerrilla, so to speak. So there's still some, not a lot changed because a lot of these guys were done from the last time we showed things. And then here, demoralization hurt this stack. They just lost a step, and everything else is in pretty good shape. So that's how things have ended up. So we will get into the next turn, the summer of 1809. A couple of things that will matter there. We're going to have some Spanish reinforcements, and I'll have to look to see where they come in at. There's a little bit of a stack that comes in to help the coalition. And then we'll obviously get started again. there is a chance that this army could come down and relieve Vienna or do something. But I think it is a pretty straightforward bet that France is going to have Napoleon kind of move forward to deal with those guys. Maybe Davout comes up into Prague. Murat may finish off the Tyrolean rebels. This guy is going to eliminate this army. We'll see what happens to Vienna. Um, Generally, I think that the French should be able to um, take Vienna and be in a position where they can get the conquer state by the end of summer. I think that's likely, but we'll have to see. So we'll take care of that in the next video. I may target the next video to be summer, autumn, and winter of 1809, just so we're able to move more quickly. But since this was the start of a new campaign, or I guess the start of another campaign scenario, we would take a little bit more time to show each chit pool. In the next video, I may simply cover things every couple of chit pools just to keep things moving. But very likely Austria is done, and then Spain continues to be a challenge. In the next video at the beginning, I will have probably already done some diplomacy, so there is a chance that the British have some money to do some diplomacy. I'm not sure what their options are in this scenario. There's not a lot of obvious ones because Prussia can't be affected. I don't think Russia can be affected. Austria is already in. Spain is already in. So I think it just comes down to Britain potentially trying to manipulate some minors, and even then, it will be very selective options are going to be available there. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. The spring of 1809 is past. We go into the summer and the next one. Take care. Keep gaming.